All right, Holidays in Tiro. We're live with Delegate Kimberlyn King-Hinds at the MP studio here at the Nauru building. Delegate, welcome home and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, thank you.
And I know yesterday was Veterans Day and you participated in the run, in the ceremony, and your office also held a really great resource fair with 17 agencies. So yeah, tell us about how that went for you.
Well, you know, I was really pleased, excited, and about the show of support from just the different government agencies who came out, who decided to spend their Veterans Day honoring the people who have served by participating in the resource fair and bringing those resources for them to be able to sign up and get more information on, right? Because Project Buddy Check 670 organized a family fun day for the vets and their families, and so we wanted to make sure that we brought the resources to them instead of waiting for them, you know, to go and find those resources themselves. So I was really, really happy and excited to see the great turnout. Project Buddy Check 670 did such a great job in terms of organizing that event, and we were just, you know, all too pleased to be able to there to support them and provide that service to them.
Great, and I did want to also ask you about the government shutdown. That's the news of the day. 42 days, the longest in history.
It's been the news for 42 days.
Right. And the last one was 35 days, just for comparison, right? The last longest one. And so, but you remained on the Hill. So
I did.
Tell us about the time there. Yeah.
I just got back on, I just got back Monday morning, and you know, although the federal government was shut down, I used that opportunity to be able to go and knock on other doors to try and figure out some of these issues that are impacting the CNMI. And so it was productive. You know, other folks had the opportunity to go back home to their districts, but we were given notice that we had to be able to, you know, we need to be ready to be able to come back. And so I wasn't sure how long this was going to drag on, but I was already scheduled to be back home because this is not a scheduled week for work in DC. So I was like, no matter what happens, I was going to come back because I didn't see the shutdown ending this week. What I do expect to happen now that the Senate has passed the CR with 3 additional appropriations bill now, you know, that's headed to the House tomorrow morning when we wake up at 6 o'clock. The House is going to begin deliberations on those packages that are sent down, and so there's that work that's happening there. But obviously, as a delegate, I don't get to vote on that, and so I'm not needed there. But I do expect to be heading back on Sunday because we have been advised there's going to be, you know, just a bunch of work to get caught up for all the time missed because of the shutdown, right? And I'm really happy to see some of our asks included in this CR package. Hopefully nothing changes when it goes through the House and everything goes smooth so that we can get back to the business of doing the business of, you know, passing laws and getting the relief that's needed for the people. What I'm incredibly pleased to see as part of this package is the year-long appropriation for SNAP, right? Because this CR takes us to January, and if there's a disagreement again that happens, right, we're facing another potential shutdown, and the SNAP program is very critical to our people here, and not just to put food on the table, but when you're taking out $4.2 million out of the economy, a very fragile economy, it has a cascading impact on government revenues and other small businesses that rely on those funds to be able to generate and circulate in the economy. And so I'm really happy to see that folks are very mindful about that and have ensured that despite what happens, what comes next January, that you know, that funding remains intact.
And I don't want to linger on the reasons why we're on the tail end of it being over. None of us want to be in this in the first place.
Yeah.
But you know, we read the national headlines. It's about extending the ACA, aka Obamacare, subsidies. In the Senate, I think they said that they're willing to negotiate it within the year. But on the ground, how would you explain why we're in a shutdown from your perspective?
Well, I think it really is a political fight, and fundamentally it is about the extension of the Affordable Care Act, right? And a lot of people are asking why I haven't spoken out for or against whatever this conversation is that is happening on the national level. And for me, I'm very mission-oriented, and the mission is the CNMI. And the reality is that the Affordable Care Act has been law for the past 15 years. And the extensions that are being talked about are extensions that were given to be able to provide some relief during the pandemic, right? And so we're talking about COVID era relief with regards to these subsidies, and that's set to expire. The reality is that we are not included as part of this program, and so when we're talking about finding relief, what I would like to see is reform, so that the small businesses here in our community who are not working for the government can get insurance coverage. How do we avail of some of these programs, and so that our small businesses are not one illness away from being bankrupt because they cannot afford health care, right? And that's the reality. We're not part of this program. And so I'm not going to get into those types of conversation because it has no impact on us. What I would like to see is that we find a way that we get coverage, for folks who are independent contractors, and make insurance, healthcare insurance affordable for our people out here who are not working in the government, who are not retirees.
All right. And of course, like you said, SNAP might get that funding, but it's already halfway through the month practically, and our people haven't seen any funding come in. I know there's the local appropriations. What are you hearing? I know there's been a few court rulings. It can be a lot to follow. So what's the latest as of right now?
Well, so this is a legal beef between the states and the federal government with regards to legal authority to tap into certain funds, specifically Section 32 funds, right? That is really set aside to, for the school lunch programs, for covering money for food banks, for cases of natural disaster like typhoons or other types of national crisis, right, where you get supplemental assistance as a result of those natural disasters. But the reality is that what I care about is the people that are hurting, and I think I get the legal arguments, right? The administration is coming out and saying, hey, this is a violation of the appropriations clause of the Constitution, because when the judiciary is coming in and saying you got to go and spend this money that's not been appropriated by Congress, it amounts to judicial appropriation. And so, those are all great legal debates, but I'm far more interested in the human impact of these legal debates with regards to the everyday folks who are being impacted, right? And in an economy like ours, this is not a situation where folks can just go and pick up another side job. There are no jobs here right now. This is not a situation where you can just go and find other sources of revenue to be able to cover cost of food. And so that's what I'm concerned about, and I'm just really over this shutdown, right? I'm of the position that we put the people first, and the people who are most vulnerable and hurting in the community. And so I'm really pleased to see that, Democrats have decided that was an issue that is of utmost importance to them as well, and that they're willing to concede and join in to be able to get this kicked down to the House so that we can, end this shutdown once and for all.
I know you've sent out some updates, and you're explaining how NAP is different from SNAP. It's a block grant that we get, and there are actually some unused funds that you were hoping could be moved around. Is there any update on that? And I guess future shutdowns will happen, right? Yeah. Hopefully not at this length.
Yeah.
But how do we avoid specifically NAP from being cut in future programs? Is there a way we can do that?
Well, so that has been the communications, right, that we've been having with USDA. But the reality is that when you have a federal shutdown, you have people who are not at the office to address some of these issues, right? You're running a skeletal crew with regards to these programs, and then when you have the administration lay down the law with regards to what is the authority in as far as releasing these funds, it calls everything into question, right? And that's kind of the challenge, right, that we face, is that we get lumped into these larger conversations, and it makes it very difficult. We tried. We were knocking on all the doors, but the reality is that decisions were made the way that they were, and we were impacted.
And I know other states, and this came up in conversation with some organizations who are, meeting the moment right now, passing out food and even rental assistance. Part of the conversation is, like, unlike other states, we don't have like food banks that you can kind of just, appropriate money to. But even the $1 million that is still making its way through the legislature, we don't know when we're exactly going to see that. I mean, how do we prepare for something like this in the future?
Well, everybody keeps talking about, and this has been an age-old conversation, right, about making sure that we do have money for rainy days like this, right? But you can only have money for rainy days when you have a sound economy and you're not constantly trying to live, to put out fires. And that's basically all that we're doing right now. And the reality is even if you move that $1 million through legislation, there's a lot of processes that NAP has to follow with regards to the manner in which you distribute these funds. And so, my hope is that this shutdown ends tomorrow, gets signed into law, and the funds are fully released. And I'm happy that, and I hope that the appropriations, one of the appropriations bill that's attached to this CR, which covers the SNAP and the NAP program, fully funds it for a year. So no matter what happens in January with the debate over the budget, we don't get caught up again in this conversation.
All right. I wanted to shift to exactly that, the economy. Last we spoke, and ever since that press conference, it's been a few months at this point, and we know some of the funds from Interior have already been dispersed, and they are also requiring basically that the Commonwealth shows its work, right, to get more of the funds and potentially more funds. What's the conversation with Interior like, and and your role in the whole conversation about the audits and the economy?
Well, so we have a meeting this afternoon with the governor, the lieutenant governor, the House and the Senate, right, to work through some of these issues, to flesh out where we're at with regards to the audit, where we're at in terms of actual revenue collections, right, and work out a plan, because those funds come with, like any grant, right? Grants always come with a condition, and there were conditions that came with this money, and so we got to look at that. And we have our work cut out for us, right? Because the second quarter ask is a huge chunk of money, and there are different ideas as to how we go about doing that. And some of these things are not things that I'm necessarily happy with or comfortable with. And some of the conversation right now that's happening is an ask by the Interior to potentially reduce the workforce in the government by 20%. And so for me, that's unacceptable, because, well, these are the folks who are now keeping the economy afloat, right? These are the people, absent the tourists that normally is your consumer base in this economy, the government workers are really literally what's keeping these small businesses afloat, that, generates this revenue that feeds into the government, right? And so, having those tough conversations, right, this week is one of the things to do on the list, and just trying to see where we're at with regards to the budget, the projections as it relates to the tourism industry, and getting a very realistic perspective, right, and then getting a consensus from the government as to what is the plan, and how do we work together to execute those plans. But obviously the economy is on everybody's mind, and I'm really happy to see that the Interior is willing to roll up its sleeve and participate in that conversation. I know that MBA is about to head out to Korea to have those conversations as to how do we increase the number of flights that come, that's coming into the CNMI, and the Interior has chimed in and said that they want to participate in that travel. And so there's a lot of different moving pieces, Tomas. A lot is happening. I wish that it was yielding the immediate results that we are seeking, but things are moving, not as fast as I would like them to see, but we just keep, we just have to keep hammering at it.
I just want to clarify, because that's the first I've heard about the 20% reduction ask. So is it correct to say the Department of Interior, in potentially granting more funding, is asking the CNMI government to reduce its workforce by 20%?
Well, that's one of the thoughts.
One of the thoughts.
Right,
okay.
One of the thoughts. And so...
that's a big ask.
That's a big ask.
Yeah.
That's a big ask, and not something I agree with, frankly. And it's, I believe in streamlining and right-sizing government. I think that this community also looks at our government as being bloated, right? And that a lot of these departments can be streamlined to be more efficient, and that we can incorporate technology to be able to, more effectively and efficiently produce or render these services to our community, right? But it's about timing, right? When your customers are the government employees who are going into these stores, who are going into these small businesses, who are going into these restaurants, right? These are the customers, and you're going to take out 20%, right, of those customers in a very dire situation. That is going to have, a negative impact in an already bad situation. And so there needs to be some logic and an analysis on if we're trying to help the economy, what do these steps mean in terms of the economy, right? It has to make sense. And right now, at this particular moment, I think that is a very drastic ask, given where we're at.
And any movement on the conversation about extending military lease terms on Tinian?
So I think that right now is still kind of being talked about, but there's no real clarity as to what that potentially looks like. I think people are looking at different ideas, right, as to how to make that work, because the reality is when you're talking about public lands, right, all these lands are public lands. When you enter into lease agreements, this money is going to go to MPLT. That's just the reality of our Constitution. And so, is that the most effective way of infusing cash into the CNMI, right? Because what we need basically is to supplant the loss of revenues with cash to be able to keep the government afloat. And the reality is that there's a lot of concern that come second quarter next year, we are going to be in a far worse situation than we are right now, given the trends with regards to the economy. And so, that is a conversation should become more crystallized, that needs to be had with the community, because these lands belong to the people, and the decisions that need to be made as it relates to that issue needs to be made by the people.
All right. And I'm not sure where we're at with mail. I don't know if that's dropped down the list given everything that's happening, but is there clarity on mail?
There is no clarity on mail, and we are actually dropping legislation that we will be sharing with you. We've had the other, territories, co-sponsor the legislation that we're dropping. But the reality is, right, like even those types of conversations get stalled because of the government shutdown. And so, that's kind of one of the most frustrating things with this shutdown, is that every time we make progress and we push forward, something happens that gets in the way of what it is that we're trying to do. And so I'm so over it. I want it to be over so we can get back to the business of doing the work.
And I wanted to ask for your response. This was regarding the NAP issue, and a candidate for delegate, Dr. Galvin De Guerrero, wrote in his press release when that came out, leadership is beyond lectures about how Washington works. It's about delivering results when they are needed. He didn't name you, but you do post videos explaining why things are the way they are. Did you have a response to this particular statement?
I love the mansplanation, right? I always thought that it's very important to keep our community up to date and informed. And, I thought I was being transparent and accountable to the people as to what it is that's happening with their government in those posts. If people perceive it to be a lecture, well, you know what I mean? I guess that's up to the receiver, right? But, the reality is that there are certain people who think that the solution to the NAP program is coming out and bashing the administration, right? And getting into the national political rhetoric in terms of, you know, what's happening with the Trump administration and these lawsuits. Listen, you know, I'm far more interested in the results. And the reality is this. In Washington, D.C., right, there's a lot more people who are in the middle, who are trying to do the right thing, who are trying to push forward to actually deliver results in terms of some of these policies. But you also have sections in the party whose job is to rally the base, to be able to come out in elections, to be able to come out a certain way, to be able to, you know, maintain momentum with regards to political power. I'm not looking for political power. I'm looking for results for the people. And I'm far more interested in working on that than, you know, becoming another Pollywood, as I like to call it, in Washington, D.C. I'm not interested in that.
All right. And I did want to, along the same lines of your social media, I know you post several different videos. On Fridays, you have very fun videos coming out.
Yeah.
And there have been some comments, you know,
Yeah.
Don't post those videos, you should be working, right? Those are some of those comments. I mean, you want to talk about just your approach to social media, why you think that's important, and what you hope you're achieving. Like you explained a little bit of it about, you know, connecting, being transparent, but just wanted to hear from you. Yeah.
So, you know, I want to, as much as possible, have the public informed, right, with a lot of these issues that are impacting the CNMI, both, you know, and the interplay between the local government and the national government, right? And the reality is that a lot of people don't like to consume dense information, right? And so how do I get people to buy in to subscribing and following the newsletter, right? And the lighter pieces of the posts, right, is what attracts traffic to the newsletter or to just the site, and it gets people to actually click and watch, for example, like a 4-minute explainer, you know what I mean, on what the CR is and what the filibuster is, right? And so, you know, it's like with anything, right, that you do in life, you're going to have the people who love it, and then you're going to have people who hate it, right? And it's okay. Right? It's okay. I know that what I'm doing is very different, but it's no different than the manner in which a lot of people in DC are trying to get their citizens informed. And so, you know, I like to try new things, different ways in everything that I do, right? And, you know, let's say, for example, where we've been going about making certain arguments for certain policies. And I think my job basically is to understand that some of these arguments, right, and the way we're going about making these asks is not working. The job is to be able to take a step back and say, okay, if this is not working, what is the other route? What is the alternative? How do we, you know, adapt and overcome to be able to make an argument that people will start buying into to be able to get the help? And I think it's the same way, right, with regards to getting information out. The other thing is, this is not your grandparents' politics anymore, not even your parents' politics, right? And I'm far more interested in trying to reach the younger voters, and not so that I can get reelected, but I want younger voters to understand what's happening in the community, and I want them to have buy-in, because the decisions that we're making today is going to far more impact that 18-year-old who's coming out of high school, who is entering college, than it will somebody who's my age, right? And the manner in which they consume information is very different than my mother's generation, who liked the more hard copies newspaper, right? I mean, even the way media works today, I mean, you have leveled up, right, from print to now making sure that you get that information and you get these voices heard in real time in a different platform. So it's the same concept, and you know, it's not something that I love to do, but I think it's important to understand where we're at with regards to use of technology to be able to bring out some of these messages.
Well, welcome to social media where no one agrees.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah.
I know it is something new that even myself as a journalist have been tracking.
Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
keep up with the social media too.
Yeah.
Kim, I know you've got less than a week on island, so I want to respect your time. But anything else you want to let the constituents know, especially as you're touching base at home and then heading out in a few days?
You know, the work ahead as soon as this happens is we have our work cut out for us, and it's looking like the schedule is going to be incredibly packed. And so when I leave, I'm not quite sure when I'm going to be back. And so, but you know, I will do my best to keep everybody in the loop through different engagements on social media. But there is one thing I want to say, because I made a really big boo-boo yesterday, Tomas.
Okay.
So I landed on Monday, and you know, I had to stay up all night, you know, going into Tuesday morning, because we had a conference call to just kind of talk about, you know, what's happening in the Senate and what the next plan is. And then I had to wake up and then do the run and then a whole day of festivities. And I had an engagement last night that I missed. And I was supposed to go and help send off our under 17 boys team who's about to go to Vietnam to compete, right? And I missed that. And so I just wanted to hop on here and take a minute to say, go get them, boys. You're not just soccer players when you go out there to represent the CNMI on the national level. You are ambassadors of this island. And so go play your heart out, have fun, but just remember, right, to represent us with pride. And I'm very, very proud of you already, and I expect that you do well. And shout out, you know, to the organizers who have created this opportunity for our kids to be able to play on the national level, because you can only get better if you play with somebody better, right?
All right, and thanks so much. It's always great to catch up with you again. And alternatively, the title informally is Your Shot of Espresso. So
yes.
thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.